So a quick review of what we're going to cover today. We're going to do a quick market overview. So what's going on at present, what predictions are we seeing for the energy market going forwards? We're going to go over the energy bill discount scheme, which is coming into play from the 1st of April, what that means, what the eligibility criteria is, and then we'll move on to billing queries and potential areas of recovery on your utility bills. And we'll be finishing off with an explanation of the remote discovery document service. And we will follow that up with any questions you may have about anything that's energy related. So today there is me, Emily Berry, that's a picture of me, hopefully looking the same, partnership manager at Utility Aid, and I'm joined by William Campbell, who likes to be called Billy, our commercial director as well. So please feel free to answer any questions as we go through the content today. So to start off with, we're going to do a quick overview of what's going on in the market. So this really scary graph here shows the price history for major energy commodities, so electricity, gas and oil, since the beginning of 2021. We can see that it's showing the dramatic volatility and increasing prices over the last year, and we can particularly see the peak in August. Entering into 2023, we have seen wholesale prices. I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard it in the news. They've actually dipped in reaction to the warm winter we had. We had a warmer winter than expected. Hard to believe, I know, because we've all been freezing since January. And also the economic difficulties in China have had an impact as well, as they are a major market driver for the energy markets. However, there are several sources that are reporting that high energy prices will be a feature in some cases for the next decade. So there's a couple of reasons why that's happening. One of them is we've allowed ourselves to become dependent on Russia for our gas supply, as I'm sure all of us are already aware. When we look at the chart at the bottom here, in the bottom right, hopefully you can all see that, it shows where imports of our gas have come from every month since the beginning of 21. So to go into a little bit of detail to give you a bit of background on that, the red bars are imports from Russia. So we can see that those have depleted since the beginning of 2021 coming into the end of 22. We can see that we've seen a depletion in how much we're relying on that supply coming through. The blue bars are imports from Norway, which have remained fairly consistent, as you can see. However, we can see a significant increase in liquefied natural gas, which is LNG shipments. It's good that we've obviously not reliant on Russia as much as we used to be for our supplies for gas. However, there is a slight issue with us becoming really reliant on LNG because LNG flows to the highest bidder. So a lot of people refer to them as pirates of the sea sometimes because they will go to whoever is giving them the most money at the time.
Can I just add to that, Emily?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so it's a coincidence or not that the Nord Stream pipeline was damaged, which also led to a major influx of American LNG gas coming into the UK. I think it's slightly worrying, but we are competing, as Emily said, for that gas throughout the world. And China's economic lockdown was basically due to the high COVID rates that have increased again. As that flattens or bottoms out, then they will be back in the market for the gas. So that's the kind of decade warning for high gas prices. Sorry, Emily.
No, thank you, Billy. And actually really good point that Billy touched on there, because the other thing that we have to take into consideration with us all competing for these LNG imports is that actually global warming is going to have an effect on that as well. We'll see differences in temperatures throughout the year, which might make some countries that weren't necessarily needing oil at certain times of the year then needing huge amounts of it. So it's not necessarily a reliable source for us to put all of our hopes on, essentially. The other thing to take into consideration as well, there's a couple of different changes coming through. So storage capacity is one of them. We have seen Centrica recommission the North Sea Rough Storage Facility. So what that essentially means is that we're going to have a higher demand for gas over the summer because we need to fill the storage up, essentially. which suggests that overall prices are likely to be more stable, but will remain relatively high. So what we're hoping is that whilst it's not good news that the prices are going to remain high, hopefully we won't see what we saw last year with the volatility in terms of people not being able to get prices from suppliers. Another huge problem we've got in the UK as well is that our electricity is mainly gas fired and still makes up 40% of the UK's electricity production. So our gas prices dictate what our electricity prices are, which is why when we look at the previous slide that I initially showed you, you can see when you look back at it that the two are very interlinked across the chart when we look at how they've reviewed and changed over the past couple of years. On the positive side, though, there are positives in this presentation, I promise. The proportion of renewable generation continues to increase, which is fantastic. And when the wind really picks up, it becomes the highest single contributor to our markets, which is great news. A huge impact of that has been the demand for renewable technology and also the demand for renewable tariffs. So if we keep trying to go green, we can only encourage the suppliers and hopefully the government to further invest in creating more wind farms and solar farms for us. Which brings me on to the energy discount scheme. We've had a lot of requests coming into 2023, as you can probably imagine, of people trying to understand how does it actually work in practice and is this applicable for my organisation? So I'm just going to go over the basics. If anyone's got any questions or has something that's specific to their organisation, then just let us know either today or later on and we'll be happy to go through that with you. But the Energy Bill Discount Scheme, which also has a lovely acronym of EBDS, will commence from the 1st of April 23 to the 31st of March 2024. The new scheme will be available to everyone on a non-domestic contract. So that does include obviously businesses, but also the voluntary sector as well. So any organisation that's a charity, public sector organisations such as schools, hospitals and care homes. There are a couple of bits to consider with this new scheme. There is an eligibility criteria. So these are as follows. You have to be on an existing fixed price contract that was agreed on or after the 1st of December 21. Signing for a new fixed price contract, so that means that you're looking at a new option, on a deemed or out of contract or standard variable tariff, so essentially anything that's not fixed into a contract currently, on a flexible purchase or similar contract. Now that last one isn't really going to be applicable to anybody on this call, so the main things to focus on are the 3 bullet points at the top. The bottom one would be for large industry users. And how it works in practice is a little bit complicated. So I've tried to break it down into a few bullet points here to make it so everyone can see how much this would work out to be in reality terms. So non-domestic consumers will now receive a per unit discount to their energy bills during the 12-month period. So from April 23 to March 24, subject to a maximum discount. What they mean by the maximum discount is there is a maximum discount they will be able to give you, and that is based on the wholesale price. When we've looked at the Energy Bill Relief Scheme, the wholesale price has changed and has been updated, I believe, on a weekly basis. So this could be subject to change with where the wholesale prices go. The relative discount will be applied if wholesale prices are above a certain price threshold for non-domestic energy users in Great Britain and also Northern Ireland. And these maximum discounts have been set at the following. So when you look on the government website, it will say electricity is 19.61 per megawatt hour with a price threshold of 302 per megawatt hour. Essentially, what that equals in reality terms is 1.961 pence per kilowatt hour. And when we look at the gas offering, we can see that they're offering 6.97 per megawatt hour with a price threshold of 107 per megawatt hour, which equals around 0.697 pence per kilowatt hour. And I've added just a little bit of a note there to say that what the megawatt hour equates to, just so you can get an idea of how this looks in reality.
Just to be clear there, Emily, so the 1.961 on power and the 0.697 pence are what the discounts would be to the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Billy. Yes, we're just trying to give you an idea of what this discount, because in megawatt hours, obviously it sounds like a lot, but in reality, the amount isn't necessarily as much as what people think it would be. To sum up on this point with the energy bill discount scheme, the maximum discount can be received at 1.961 pence per kilowatt hour for electricity and 0.697 pence per kilowatt hour for gas. As Billy said, this is what it will actually look like on your invoice, how much the discount will be. Suppliers will automatically apply the reductions. This is a really important point to know, because we did have some customers approach us last year saying they had cold callers asking them to sign up to receive the discount. If you do have that, please do ignore it, because it will automatically be supplied by your supplier. So please don't take any of those calls seriously. And the last point is that this applies to anyone on an existing fixed price contract that was agreed on after the 1st of December or on the 1st of December. If you need help with checking your contracts or any information like that, just to make sure if you are eligible for this, then do let me know, because I'm more than happy to check paperwork. I've been doing it for a while for people, so feel free to send over. Unfortunately, the new scheme, in my opinion, isn't necessarily going to help everybody, and that alone isn't going to support you in reducing your utility costs. So we've had to look at ways in which we can advise people on how they can meaningfully reduce their energy expenditure. So I wanted to touch on a couple of things that you can do to help reduce your costs further. So there's a couple of things that we're going to cover. One of them is checking your current energy bills for discrepancies and estimates, reducing your on-site energy usage, and reducing any energy that's wasted currently. So the first thing to cover is billing discrepancies and estimates. This is something we speak about all the time at Utility Aid. We have a validation department that work through validating customer invoices. So they review customer invoices and identify any areas where the customer could be being overcharged, and then go through the work with the customer to make that cost recovery. To date, we're over 4.7 million in supplier overcharges that have then been put back to the customer. So that's just to show you how many issues there are on customers' bills not being 100% correct. So it's always a good place to start is, how am I currently being billed, and are there any areas where I could make some savings? When I've asked our head of invoice validation what the two most common overcharges were that they see, they were estimated readings and VAT and climate change levy charges. So to start with, estimated readings is probably one of the most common ones that I come across personally. And the main reason is that suppliers legally only need to read your meter once every 2 years. So if no one's reading the meter and you haven't got a smart meter, perhaps you've had problems getting one fitted, you will probably be being billed to estimates. And experiencing problems with that as well. It's really important that you take readings monthly and submit them to your supplier, either at the end or the start of each month, and keep a record of them for yourself as well. Usually what I recommend to customers as well who have had experiences with overestimations on their bills is to take a date stamped photo, if possible, on the day that you've taken the meter reading, and that will stop any problems with the supplier. So if they need proof that your reading is what you've said it is, you've already got it. So that's something that I personally recommend to do. The other issue is VAT and CCL. Whilst we can't necessarily advise you on what you qualify for, it's really important that you check either maybe with your accountant, or I know that ACRE do have some help and support on this on their website from memory as well. And it's then really important that you let your supplier know that you are entitled to a reduction. One thing to note on this is that each supplier does it differently. So each supplier will have what they call a VAT declaration form, and they all look a little bit different, just to make it a little bit harder for you. But we're more than happy to help you if you have any questions about filling these in. And another point to mention on this note is every supplier operates how they pay this money back to the customer differently also. So some suppliers will, if you're 2 years into a 3-year contract, will backdate the VAT correctly for you to the start of the contract. Some suppliers will only do it for a month, and then you have to go through HMRC, which can be a little bit painful. So my recommendation would be to check as soon as you can and get that confirmed, and then apply for the VAT to be corrected on your invoices as soon as possible. This brings me on to reducing on-site energy usage. We have been working on helping customers with this for some time now. As you can probably all imagine, this is on the top of most people's agendas at the moment, because one of the only ways to make savings on your utility expenditure is by cutting down how much you use on site. So last year we completed a survey in collaboration with Acre, some of you might have seen it, to find out what halls across the network were concerned about in relation to their utility expenditure. When we reviewed a sample, 557 halls agreed that they wanted some support in reducing their on-site energy consumption. But one of the biggest barriers in starting this process was the upfront cost of assessments or having an on-site assessment done. When we reviewed some examples, some people have mentioned that there were costs of over £1,000 in some cases to have an energy survey done, and for some halls that's just not possible. So in response to these findings, what we have launched to try and support people as much as possible with this is something called a remote discovery document service. And to give you a little bit of an idea of what that is, we use AI technology to bridge the gap. So instead of having someone physically come on site to see you and charge you basically for traveling and their accommodation, essentially, what we're doing is we're using a mobile app where you'll be connected to a qualified energy assessor, one of our energy assessors, who will tour your building with you by video link, assessing all the areas of the building's energy usage. So the great thing about this process is it gives you the opportunity to have somebody with that experience and that knowledge go around the building with you and do an education piece if needed whilst they're assessing your premises. And then following on from the survey, you'll receive a full report, a follow-up consultation, and this will include things like recommendations on metering upgrades, additional monitoring, energy monitoring packages, annual carbon energy reports, an introduction to any partners that we work with or that we can support you with in terms of putting renewable technology in. It's really important to note that what we're trying to do as a company is not put things in place for you in terms of renewable technology, because we want to be completely unbiased. So our service is all that we sell on this side of things. We don't sell solar panels or anything like that. We're just looking at what's best for you as an organization. And because we're doing this through a mobile device and not visiting you in person, costs for halls and centres start at just £150, so a lot cheaper. And one of the biggest things that our head of net zero has seen is that the best place to start usually is by reviewing what's currently being used, what's currently being wasted, and potentially the behaviours of the people that use stuff on site, and making small changes like that that don't cost a lot of money but can make a huge impact to your overall expenditure on utilities. And I think that is everything from us, and now we can open the floor for questions, if that's okay, Lisa.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Emily. We have got some questions popped up in the chat already, so I don't know if that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Graham James has asked, is oil specifically committed? Graham, I don't know if you wanted to expand on that.
Yeah, that should be omitted rather than committed. The wonderful predictive text. But yeah, is oil specifically omitted from this scheme?
On the original scheme, Graham, it was included, but there seemed to be a delay in getting the rebates out to customers. We don't specifically deal in the oil market, but anything that relates to heating should be included.
Right, because of course we don't, as such, unlike electricity, which is just sort of, you know, it's there on the line. Oil, of course, comes in on a tanker,
Yeah.
And I haven't seen any rebates or reductions on the prices we've been given, or anything that seems to relate to the discounts scheme.
If you could drop us an email, Lisa will give you our details. If you could drop me an email, Graham, I'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
The contacts I have in the
yeah,
market.
I think government, I did take part in an interview with Biz recently around the oil rebate scheme, and I think there is something brewing through the government departments, but I don't think anything's been announced that I've heard of as yet. Billy, you might be able to find out more than I can.
Well, yeah, again, collaboration's the key to everything, so I'm happy to have a look at it and speak to my contacts and find out what's happening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, so the next question along is from Chris. Madingley Village Hall is on a fixed 4-year contract agreed in February 2020. As this is lower than the awful rates today, I presume no discount will be applied. I don't know if you've got a comment on that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Sign the contract in 2020, you're sitting in a very, very comfortable position, and no discounts will be applied because you decided to manage your risk by taking the long-term contract. So you won't receive the contracts as it was signed before April 21. Sorry, December 21.
Chris, are you happy with that? Did you have any further comments or? Chris, we can't seem to hear you. I think you're unmuted, but I don't think maybe your sound isn't working properly. We'll have to come back to you, Chris. Okay, so Bob Wells from Bar Hill has said, why has the standing charge increased so much? Ours has gone from £35.81 per quarter to £67.97 per calendar month.
Wow. I'll go first on that, Emily, because there might be, and it's not Chatham House rules for me, so I'll say what I think about that. So the standing charges basically are distribution, transportation, renewable obligations, taxes. Now, the government are taking the action solely on the commodity price, which represents 40% of your bill, or did represent 40% of the bill in 21. So why the standing charge has gone up so much, that's something I would certainly question with the supplier, because it's the commodity prices that have risen highly through the energy crisis. It's not necessarily the distribution transportation charges that have increased. I can say that National Grid are posting £1 billion profit a year, so their shareholders are happy, but I think that, in my personal opinion, that something needed to be done to reduce the standing charges, or to encourage National Grid and other groups to get on board and help people. So I would question that with the supplier. And again, Emily and the team would be happy to help and ask the questions. That seems to be a ridiculous amount, and it's supposed to be approved by Ofgem as well. So Emily, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to thank you so much, Billy. In terms of what I can add to your question, Bob, I have seen a lot of customers have increases like yours, unfortunately, in their standing charges. A big contributing factor that we've basically been told by suppliers is a big concern going forwards is that when we saw a number of suppliers go under, which I think the main majority of the suppliers going under that ceased trading was during when we had COVID. There were a number of charges that suppliers are expected to pay, I believe, in October from memory. And one of them was what Billy mentioned, which was renewable obligation. The issue that we have when a supplier goes under is that their share of that charge, that renewable obligation charge, for example, still needs to be paid. And instead of it just going away and being depleted because the company's gone under, what happens is it gets spread around the remaining suppliers to make that payment. So we have seen big increases in standing charges, and usually one of the reasons for that is because the supplier is having to pay extra, essentially, in overcharges. We have seen, and this is a really important thing to touch on actually, in relation to that, sometimes you'll have customers that experience changes in their contracts halfway through and they can't really figure out why. There are two types of contracts available on the market. One of them is a fixed contract and the other one's what we call a fully fixed. And this is an example of this and kind of relates to your question in a way, Bob. When we see customers come to us who have a sudden change, it's because they've not got a fully fixed contract. And when things like the renewable obligations charges and things like that increase, what suppliers will do is they'll look through their current customer book and see who's not in a fully fixed contract and up charges if they need to make those payments that are required of them. Whether that's, you know, right or wrong is another question entirely, but that could also be a contributing factor to your increase on your standing charge. But more than happy to take a look and see if there's any areas where there could be cost recovery on that for you.
Another question, Bob, just quickly, was that mid-contract or was that you signing another contract?
It was us ending our existing contract, which unfortunately ended on the 1st of December, last 1st of December. And some of the rates that we were being quoted for days, you know, were 50, 60, 70p a unit. We went from 14p a unit to 34.
Yeah.
Mainly because, you know, we could fix for 2 years on 34.
Yeah.
Of when all around us we were 50, 60, 70p.
Sure.
Our Scout hut that's opposite our village hall, they allowed their contract to run out without realizing it, and they were being charged 99p a unit.
It's just
and so we have agreed that they can now take their energy from the village hall, so we're charging them the same rate as we get charged. But you know, for those of you that have been there, you'll know we've got a social club on the first floor. They use 92% of our energy, and our energy bill's gone up from £800 a month to 2,400.
yeah.
I don't know how the social club's going to keep going at the minute, but that's another story.
One last question, Bob. Sorry to be. Did you do that through a broker or did you do that directly?
Done it through a broker. I tried to do it directly with SSE. They didn't want to talk to me.
Right. So I want to be absolutely fair with everybody. It's also possible that the broker has uplifted commissions in the standing charge.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to bear in mind. That happens. So it might not even be an Ofgem approved uplift.
Yeah, I got the same situation.
When you get your supplier don't want to talk to you, there's not a great deal you can do, is there?
Well, there's a complaints procedure that came into place in December of last year. And it's a lot more, apologies for my dog, by the way. Yeah, it's a lot more robust than it used to be. Again, we can give you advice where to go and what to do.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
Chris, did you say you had the same problem?
Yeah, you can hear me now, I hope.
Yeah, we can hear you
Okay.
now.
Yeah, fine. Okay, I got the same experience as the last gentleman in that about 18 months ago, a broker came on to me and I found exactly the same problem. You can't get, you know, we're with SSE and you can't talk to them really. If the broker's involved and they've got the claim on you, they hold on to that. But I found the same thing as the previous gentleman in that they offered me, quite wisely as it turned out, an extension of 2 years to my existing 4-year contract. Now that brings us up to, when that fires up in another year's time, that'll bring us up to 34p daytime. The nighttime rate is a bit horrible, but yeah, so I've got an extension on the contract which takes us to 2026. But yeah, the standing charge, that's not so good either, but very interesting experience. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. We've got a few more questions, if you're okay to take a few more questions. Peter Damp Peter Dampney has said, we have to renew our fixed price contract sometime in 2023. How would you expect prices to change from now in 2023? I realise impossible question, but would welcome your views.
Are you okay with me starting with that one, Billy?
Hey, you start, because I could be there all day, Emily. Carry on.
So Peter, you're right. It's a very difficult thing to answer, because after the last couple of years, there's so many things that normally would never be predicted that have happened. So we have to bear that in mind. One of the things that I'm doing at the moment when I'm looking at the energy prices for the next couple of years or even 5 years is I'm kind of looking at all the contributing factors. So a lot of people have just focused on how the war in Ukraine has affected the market, when in actual fact prices were being reported to increase up to 4-fold before Russia even invaded Ukraine. So there's so many contributing factors to the prices that we're seeing at the moment. In terms of how I see it going for 23, from my perspective and from everything that I've read so far, I think the prices will remain high, but I think that they will be less volatile than last year. And my reason for that is because we have a plan in place of what we're doing in terms of our gas supply. We know that we're going to be prioritising filling up the Rough storage this year, and I think that will keep prices quite static throughout the year in terms of the level that they'll be at. So historically, you'd be better off buying a price in the summer, right? Because less people are using gas, less people are using electricity, let's say. I don't think we can apply that to the markets anymore in the same way, just because the priority is going to be on making sure that we're filling up the storage facility. Whilst our reliance and generation of electricity is gas fired, I think that's still going to be an issue throughout this year. So in terms of where we see prices going, I think what we're experiencing now is going to continue. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Billy.
Yeah, there's so many factors that could play a part in this, and of course the first factor would be the removal of the Russian regime. As it sits. They'll be taken over probably by another oligarch stroke gangster who may want to do more business. We do know that their economy is being hit really hard. They're not being able to ship the oil that they expected to ship, or the gas. So Germany took 80% of their gas from Russia, and it's now down at 0%. So it's going to have an economic effect. Whether the war ceasing will have an immediate effect on the markets, it will certainly have an effect, but how sustainable that effect will need to be seen. They need to turn on Nord Stream 2, which I don't know how the repairs are going, but yeah, a lot of things happening. Again, the nuclear generation in the UK has got to come into play. So with that and more capacity, that's going to help. Talking about power cuts now and asking people at home to switch off while EastEnders is on, well, that's telling me that there is a bit of pressure on the system. So yeah, very difficult to say. It just depends on your appetite for risk. Can things get worse? If you believe they are, go for a 24-month. If you want to hold and see what may happen, then a 12 months probably what you want to do.
Yeah, I think we've got to remember that the war just shone a light on the fragility of the system that we have in place. We were too reliant on Russian gas for a very, very long time, and we're not necessarily independent with how we power our own country. So as Billy said, it means that all these different contributing factors are going to have a huge effect, or differing effects on how the market goes. So if you do have any questions on how to look at things like the energy markets, we do have regular energy outlook reports as well, that we do send out to everybody. Doesn't matter if you're not a customer of ours, it's a useful piece of information that you can review in your own time, and it shows kind of potential forecasts for the rest of the year. So we're more than happy to share that with Lisa after the call today, so she can share that with you all as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Is there any way that people can sign up to your newsletters and information? How do they
Yeah.
do that?
So usually I have a separate mailing list. And the reason for that is because I get to then hand pick stuff. It's not computer generated, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you want to sign up for regular updates and articles and blogs that we produce, then all you need to do is just email me, and Lisa will share my details, and then I'll be more than happy to add that to the list for you.
Brilliant, thank you. I can do that after the session, and everybody who's interested can make
Yeah.
contact with you. We do have a few more questions, if you're okay to take a few more.
Yeah.
Mike has said, thanks, very helpful. Remote discovery service sounds very helpful. How do I organise this? And then he's got an additional question attached to that. Do you also advise on zero carbon targets? As I gather, we need to move away from an oil boiler, in our case, in the near future. So if you can comment on that one.
I'll take the second part of that first, Emily. So Mike, just so that you know, as part of our net zero journey and our help for village halls across the UK, we're hopefully coming up with a solution to replace the oil boilers with a gas boiler at no capex. So we'll keep you posted on that. We'll obviously let Acre know, and let Lisa know, and everybody else. But yeah, it's certainly something we're looking at. Em, do you want to take the first part?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the remote discovery document, if you want to get in touch and find out a bit more information about this, all you need to do is just, again, email me, and then I can introduce you to the team, and they'll be able to get in touch with you and advise you on next steps and how it works.
Emily, thanks very much. I'll probably do that. And but can I come back on the zero carbon thing? I mean, the dilemma we've got is in Newton, we don't have gas. We've only got oil or electricity, basically. And we've got a dodgy boiler that's, you know, needs to be loved through the winter months to keep it going. And the dilemma here is, do we replace the oiler with a like-for-like oil boiler to keep us going? And that's what some people are sort of pushing me for. However, that then commits us to a capital expense, which is only going to be for a few years until we have to move to a zero carbon option. And I just wondered, that's the reason for the question, really. Is
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you. So a green hydrogen's at least 8 years off.
Right.
An inefficient boiler is definitely going to cost you more, at least 10% more on any fuel that you're using.
Yeah.
And the gas I was referring to would be bottled gas.
Oh, right.
Again,
Okay.
yeah, again, you'd have to do the calculations, and we would help with that. But it's certainly a potential option for inefficient oil heating. But the boiler, either way, looking at a replacement is going to be financially viable, in the respect that because the energy prices are higher, the payback time is going to be less.
Great. That's really helpful. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, so the next question is from Joe at St Ives Corn Exchange. Our contract runs from 2020 to 2024 currently. We're being asked if we want to renew this month in advance to take us up to 2028. At this time, is looking to switch supplier, or is it about sticking with the same supplier you've got for more security? So are you able to comment on that?
Yes.
I'll go first. Sorry, Em, I'm just on a roll today. Most of the suppliers that went bust were all domestic suppliers. So suppliers offering contracts to homes. The reason they went into financial trouble is they didn't hedge their energy further enough out. They were basically buying it with the customer's money that was coming in day ahead, week ahead, month ahead. So that's why they went into financial difficulty. With regards to changing suppliers, it depends on your customer service, I think plays a big part with suppliers. And with regards to extending to 28, if that's a blend and extend price that you had in 2020 and they're offering you the same rates, taking you up to 28, snap their hand off. If it's increased rates, you'd have to work out what that impact was. And then I would personally go to market in 23, probably August, and see what's available for that extension period.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Joe, did you have from Joe from St Ives, did you have any other comment you wanted to make there? I can't see you on my screen. Hopefully you're there somewhere.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here.
Brilliant.
Yeah, no, that does help quite a lot. Thanks.
Good. Okay, fab. So the next question is from Graham James at Little Thetford. Is there any price comparison website service or similar for village halls to look at energy prices in the same way that domestic houses look at comparethemarket.com?
Okay, so the only one I know is Uswitch did have one. Uswitch had a commercial arm and a domestic arm. The trouble with doing it through a comparison site is you don't get bespoke prices from suppliers. You only receive prices that are set out a matrix and often issued monthly with a higher uplift in risk.
Yeah, to stop the changes, isn't that, Billy? Because then they can keep them up there for longer.
Yeah, correct.
And I think also the other thing to take into consideration with that as well, with the matrix side of it, with comparison websites, is there are a number of suppliers that aren't taking on certain types of organizations at the moment, or certain types of usage restrictions that they're putting in place. So for example, we know of some suppliers that aren't taking on any customers unless they use 20,000 kilowatts or more a year. By doing it through a comparison website, you're not necessarily getting the best offers available from the right suppliers for you, so the choice might be limited as well, is another thing that I would say. And because it's not bespoke, as Billy said, it's not taking in consideration your unique usage across a year, and points like that to take into consideration as well.
So if I get it right, then basically it's just really getting a list of all of the energy suppliers and spending time trawling through,
or come to us. Both ways are a good way to benchmark. It's going to take you quite a while to get through to those customers, and unfortunately, and please take this the right way, some of the frontline staff aren't trained well enough to deal with inquiries. So yeah, that there is value to a broker, that if you take a contract with us, we validate all your invoices at the same time you receive them. We've got SLAs in place with the suppliers that we work with. But going on a comparison website, I would never say don't do it, because it's a good benchmark.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think anyone actually mentioned what would it cost to join Utility Aid and have a contract with yourself?
So we get paid directly from the suppliers for taking them business. So there's an uplift on the contract. We can either uplift on the pence per kilowatt hour price, or we can give you a fee. It would depend on your usage. So we investigate what you have and what you're doing. We also explain all the value added service. So for somebody that uses 5,000 kilowatts a year, it probably costs £10–15.
Right. Okay. So
each one is individual the way we look at it.
Yeah. And that's obviously primarily around the electric costs, because we're primarily we don't have gas like many village halls, so we've got oil for our heating at the moment, although we are moving over to solar panels. But the main thing we use is electricity outside of that.
Yeah, it would be based on your electricity consumption. And just to add to that, we could also help you, Graham, with your solar deal for any export.
Yeah, no, that's very useful and very timely, actually. So again, is that a matter of sending an email to yourself or Billy or Emily in the first instance?
Yep, and we'll introduce you to the team.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, Graham. We've got just one more question here from Angela Donnelly. We have no gas in our village, Comberton, with our oil boiler. What do you think about air source or ground source heating?
That's
okay.
a good question.
Again, hopefully there's nobody here that has family in the business. The reports I've had back have not been great on ground source or air source. They don't appear to have hit the numbers that they were supposed to hit, but we'd be happy to share some information from people that have had it fitted, or get some information over to you. If you want to speak to individuals, yeah, we can say. But it would just, so my rule on this is always take 3 bits of information from suppliers and look at the differences between the 3 bits of information, and then question where the biggest differences are. So on amount of heat, amount of cost, yeah, it's something worth looking at 100%. And there could potentially be funding available for it, I believe.
And Angela, Angela, I can put you in touch with halls in Cambridgeshire that you can go and visit that have had both air and ground source heat pumps put in, and you can talk to them about how they run it and how it works for their hall. It's really valuable speaking to another hall about their experiences on whether it was the right route or wrong route for them to take. So I can pass information on to you.
That'd be very good. We have a commercial centre which we run from our village hall, and they actually fitted one in for them, but it is a very small couple of offices. It's a smaller area, whereas our village hall is quite large. So yeah, it's just looking at an alternative to an oil boiler. You know, it's unfortunate that we're not getting any help with the oil at present. So it's just making sure that, you know, we look at solar panels, which is also what we're looking at as well. So just to try and reduce some of the bills.
Well, Angela, we'll certainly keep you posted through Lisa on, I think my meeting's next week. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. It's just following the questionnaire that Emily brilliantly did with the Acre team, we saw quite a few problems that we thought we could address just by collaborating with other people that we know and we work with. And I think that's been quite useful. So we'll watch this space. I can't promise anything, but we're certainly trying to look for solutions.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant, thank you. We haven't got any more questions in the chat. Is there anybody else who wants to ask a question now while we've got our experts in the room? I can't see anybody indicating. Is anybody waving at all?
Here we are, we're back now.
I've got 2 pages to go through, so there's lots of people, so bear with me. Okay, I can't see anybody else.
Mike's got one, Lisa.
Sorry?
Mike's got a question.
Oh, Mike, okay, go for it.
So Mike, solar panels and batteries. So batteries are pretty expensive and they have a shelf life. So what I would do is make sure that my output for the solar panels that I have is accurate, so probably over a 12-month period, and then I'd look at battery and see whether the value of fitting the batteries to store the energy is worth it or not. They are costly at the moment. I would imagine the price will come down, but until you know exactly what you're generating, then I wouldn't put the batteries in. That's my personal opinion.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've got a couple of halls actually in the county that have gone exactly down that route as Billy's set out, said, you know, put the solar panels in first and then they've installed the battery storage afterwards. So again, I can put you in touch with, if you're interested in that, just contact me and I can put you in touch with halls that have experience in doing that. Anita's
everybody, excuse me, I've got to run, unfortunately. I've got a train to get. So
okay,
please excuse me. Please pass my details on to everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming along today. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
So we've got one question here from Anita. You're just starting to look at solar panels and where do you start? Emily, I don't know if you've got any comments in terms of where a hall should start. We can certainly obviously get some more information to Anita anyway.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, Anita, I think one of the first things to do is to first look at your building and look at the usage across a 12-month period. We need to try and identify first, before you start putting renewable technology in, is potential areas where you could be wasting energy maybe that you're using, or any issues that could have an effect on you having solar panels. So initially what I would recommend doing first is having a survey to identify if that's the best starting option for you. There might be a cheaper option that might be something completely different that might benefit you quicker than solar panels. So my first recommendation would be to review your data across a 12-month period, and then see if there's anybody that can help you with a survey and getting that extra level of support. If you've got any questions on that, do send them through to Lisa and I'll be able to show you what I mean in practice.
Okay, that's fab. Thank you. Michael Humphrey, you said you've got a question in the chat. Did you want to ask your question now?
Well, it's more of a comment really, based on the air source heat pumps and the experience we have at Gorefield. Apologies for no video. I'm afraid where I am, Wi-Fi is at a premium. Or broadband connection is, shall I say. Gorefield Hall was built with an air source heat boiler, which works great. And I think if you install it from day one with the underfloor heating that goes with it as a system, it works very well. But it also relies on electricity. Our only heat source is electricity, and we're currently running on about £600 a month on average for electricity, and we're in a fixed contract. So when that comes out, that will be quite considerable. So I would, although it ticks the boxes being a renewable energy, it relies on electricity, and I don't think it's actually a cheap option, although it's very good. Whenever you walk in the community hall, whatever time of day or night, it's a pleasant, there's no switching heating on and off. It's always a pleasant temperature. You just go in and use it. So it has its advantages, but it certainly is not an energy efficient way of doing it.
Thanks, Michael. That's really helpful.
Yeah, I agree with what you've said as well, Michael. That's the kind of reports we're getting as well, our side, in relation to heat source pumps and ground as well. And that's the thing, I think, with anything where you're looking at renewable technology, before you do anything, it's really important to speak to somebody that isn't necessarily trying to sell you a product, but somebody that's completely impartial, that can give you advice on where to start first that suits your budget as an organization. Because we have had a lot of people come to us recently having different technologies installed that haven't necessarily been the best option for that organization to do in the first point. So just bear that in mind, I think, as well, before making any big changes to your building.
Yeah, I think when Gorefield was built, the first build, because it's been extended during lockdown, and that part of the building, we didn't go with that option. We went with heat exchangers that provide heat in the winter and air conditioning in the summer. And that works well because heat permeates out of the existing building into the extension. That said, I guess it makes the air source heat pump work longer, because it's filling that extra space. But I wouldn't change the underfloor heating, and I mean, it's brilliant, but yeah, it's just not cheap to run, and it's something that needs to be. I don't think air source heat pumps work well unless you've got underfloor heating, because they only heat the water to a lot lesser degree than a conventional or oil-fired or gas-fired boiler.
Thanks, Michael. They're really good points. That's really helpful for everyone. Thank you. We've got another question here from Felicity. She said, I cannot get a smart meter fitted. My supplier, EDF, is constantly booked up. I submit regular meter readings and take photos, as you suggested earlier. Am I missing out by not having a smart meter?
So Felicity, I completely feel your pain with suppliers being booked up for smart meters. So our account management team are experiencing the same problem with a number of suppliers at the moment. There's some that are still struggling, I think, with the backlog from COVID, believe it or not, as well. With a smart meter, it's a tricky one, really, because for a lot of organisations, especially in rural areas, I think the main problem is having smart meters that actually work and submit the data correctly. in terms of what you're doing now, what you're doing is perfect with submitting them regularly and keeping a record for yourself. The only thing I would say is with smart meters, it takes away, first of all, the onus, once they're working, the onus of it all being on you to take those readings and make sure they're submitted. And you can only ever be billed on what you're actually consuming. The other thing that I would say you're potentially missing out on would be when we review customers' invoices, one of the first things we look at when we're looking at ways in which they can potentially reduce their expenditure is any sort of anomalies in their usage across a 12-month period. And what's really, really helpful is if you've got a smart meter, you can look at that data really accurately, and you can usually gain access to it online, and you can identify maybe time. So for example, we had a social club and football club come to us, and they had a spike of energy usage every Saturday morning, but nobody was on site and nobody could figure out what was going on. And we did find out that unfortunately one of the staff members was doing like a pay on the door thing to let people go in and play football when nobody else was around. So we identified that through looking at their smart meter readings. So one thing I would say is it really helps with monitoring your usage and giving you the control to make changes if you want to. If you are really struggling with getting a meter fitted, please do feel free to get in touch with me, and I can see what I can do from our side and speak to anybody at EDF to get that moving forward for you in any way. So do let me know if that would be of any use to you, and feel free to email me.
Brilliant, thank you. I saw Felicity put a thumbs up, so I guess you kind of answered all of the question there for her. Brilliant. We haven't got any more questions in the chat. Is there anything else? I'll do the quick last scan of the screens. Has anybody got anything? I can't see anybody indicating. Okay, right. So if we've exhausted all the questions, I'll do a quick kind of wrap up. So